All right.
Yes.
So, good evening. Tonight, we're going to talk about jet lag. But as usual, what I discovered when I started digging into this topic a little bit more was it wasn't really just about jet lag. Usually when I set up these talks, I pick a topic that I don't know a whole lot about. A topic that scares me a little bit, maybe a lot of it, and do my best to read a couple books up on it, or to dig into the research. And there have been some really good research articles put together for how to survive jet lag. But first, jet lag, we all sort of experience the symptoms of jet lag. But it's not just related to travel. It's part of our daily and weekly existence. Maybe more so when we're young. But even as we're into different business ventures, or we need to be engaged at a party on the weekends, or maybe, as the case is here at the NTC, we're training. And we have to be up early for the training. And then maybe on the weekends, we want to stay up later to engage socially. That causes jet lag. It's not maybe huge. It's not 3, 4, 5 hours most of the time. But 1 or 2 hours here and there will affect you in the long term. And it's not just oh well, I'm a little bit tired, I'll make up for my sleep, and Monday mornings kind of suck. No, it goes beyond that, actually. And the authors of this article show that social jet lag is actually related to obesity and other metabolic disorders, because we're disrupting our circadian rhythms. And we talked heavily, of course, about that in the talk on sleep. It came up in detox a little bit, but now we're going to reassess that topic from using a slightly different lens, and what the effects could be if we miss sleep, which is essentially what jet lag is. So first we need to understand how we get jet lag, or how we know we don't get jet lag during normal existence. And scientists have come up with fancy words for most things. This is a fancy word for a time giver. It's not truly fancy. It's a strict translation from German. Zeitgeber is German for time giver. Light, these are food sometimes, oftentimes, and actually more than I thought it was. This can be exercise. This can be something as innocuous seeming as something like grounding, which we've talked about before, and we'll talk about a little bit more this evening. So the first is light. When we talked about sleep, and I actually just turned the app off on my computer that dims my screen so that my melatonin production is not disrupted late at night. Unfortunately, it's going to be disrupted anyway because we're basking in the glory of fluorescent lighting, which is heavily on the blue end of the spectrum. Okay? So to our bodies right now, they're pretty confused. They know it's dark outside, but they're not being exposed to that. They're being exposed to a relatively full spectrum of light in here. And then we know that blue light, for instance, is the light that's going to help us wake up. It's a high frequency light, meaning that it's got higher energy than the other end of the spectrum. If you remember your Roy G. Biv, right? It's on the Biv end of the spectrum versus the Roy end of the spectrum. Okay? The Roy end of the spectrum actually allows us to produce more melatonin. Now, the studies that one of my colleagues shared with me on this did compare people being exposed to red light as just to normal light. So it wasn't necessarily that red light, I don't know that red light necessarily makes you produce more melatonin, but when people are exposed on a regular basis to fluorescent lighting or artificial lighting over and over again, and especially things like these computer screens late at night, that will disrupt our circadian rhythms. And then, of course, when you throw that on transcontinental flights, you're being exposed to whatever light they have available to you. And sometimes, oftentimes, you've woken up after a full night or half of a night of trying to sleep on the airplane, and they just wake you up by blasting the light, and waking you up immediately. So we know that blue light will make you wake up a little bit more, and you can actually use blue light blocking glasses to achieve end the disruption. And then you can use red light boxes or red light lights, light bulbs, to help calm you at night. So if you, for instance, have a night light, for me, the hallway to my bathroom is pretty darn dark. And I don't want to turn on the fluorescent light that's in the hallway, but I can use a little night light that's red, on the red spectrum. It's not going to, when I wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, it's not going to wake me up so I can't fall back asleep. And for those of you who remember the sleep presentation, depending on your chronotype, I'm a dolphin, so any little thing will wake me up and keep me up for the rest of the night. So if you know that about yourself, you're going to take every precaution you can to make sure that you stay asleep as you need. Another Zeitgeber is temperature. This surprised me when we talked about, adorable, isn't it? This surprised me a lot when we talked about sleep, and because I said, wow, my goodness, yeah, that's absolutely right. I don't sleep really well unless I'm in the cold. And I sleep so much better there. And when I realized that that optimal temperature for sleeping is between 62 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, I said, finally, somebody's telling me what I've known all the time, but I couldn't set. So temperature, it can actually be a universal resetting cue for mammals. Temperature can have almost as much of an effect as light, but not nearly the effect as food, and we will get to that in a few moments. Exercise, very important to us, being on the athletic end of the spectrum. We can use exercise as a Zeitgeber. Now, we're going to start talking about the technical terms of phase advance versus phase delay in terms of jet lag avoidance. But we know that physical exercise can accelerate the re-entrainment of human sleep-wake cycle, but not of plasma melatonin rhythm to 8-hour phase advanced sleep cycle. What? Right? The usual. So what does that mean? Re-entrainment is your shifting of your circadian rhythms. So you can shift ahead of time. You can entrain your body ahead of time to shift to a new cycle. Exercise does help us do that. And in an article I'm going to highlight in depth later on in this presentation, Thomas Riley and Louise Burke, two major researchers in here, mentioned that exercise in a new environment, so once you arrive at a destination, can act as a Zeitgeber, although it's likely to be more effective when you're using a phase delay rather than a phase advance. Okay? So a phase delay would mean that you're going to put off your sleep cycle by an hour or however long you're going to do. So usually traveling westward versus a phase advance, which again, these things come up every time I do these talks. I didn't realize that a phase advance is much more deleterious to our health than a phase delay. So the reason is, and this surprised me, though I think I heard it way back when, but you file that stuff away, and you're like, no, that can't be true. Humans don't have a 24-hour circadian rhythm. What? No, our circadian rhythm is actually slightly longer. I did hear of one study, and I can't find the citation for this one, but that put people in a completely dark environment and they actually had a circadian rhythm of about 36 hours. The article I did find cited was it was just slightly more than 24 hours. So, Elon Musk, if you're listening, going to Mars, it's going to be slightly problematic in terms of circadian rhythm. I'm sure you're thinking about that, but just saying. So it's easier to phase delay because we actually have a longer cycle than we've been adjusted to versus phase advance. And phase advancing is where we have problems, right? Monday morning is a problem, not Saturday night. Saturday night's a lot easier to deal with than Monday morning. Okay, that's your phase advance after 2 days of phase delay. So we'll highlight that and exact strategies of what to do in just a few minutes. I mentioned grounding, and grounding, I can't really say that it is a hard and fast method for eliminating jet lag or anything like that, but it is effective in reducing cortisol and reducing some of the negative and deleterious effects of being up in a fuselage 40,000 feet in the air. So grounding, for those of you who haven't been to other presentations or haven't listened to some biohacker out there yab on about grounding, grounding is no more complicated than putting your bare feet on the ground. Basic way to explain it is that the Earth is a sort of a sea of negative ions, and we develop positive ions from our daily stress and our work, moving around, and when we can't sort of use the negative ions that are in the Earth to balance out the positive ions that we've developed over whatever we end up doing, usually blocked by things like shoes, because rubber is a really great insulator, right? We can't actually balance and neutralize our charge. We are electric devices, however you want to interpret that. But we do have an electric charge, and if we can't neutralize that electric charge, then we feel we're under more stress. Being in an airplane, you develop more of that electric charge. You're under a stress. Coming back down to Earth, putting your feet on the ground or body parts on the ground really helps. The most effective way to do this is to get yourself into water, like natural water, the ocean. The ocean is a huge sink of negative ions. Or even just a natural water lake. Yeah? But grass will do just fine. I've heard of plenty of biohackers out there who will be out on the back lawn of their hotels doing yoga as soon as they get off the plane. Whatever you want to do. So, but what surprised me was the most effective in terms of entrainment was food. I thought light was going to be the more effective method for shifting your circadian rhythm. It wasn't the case. Turns out that food is more effective. So when food is plentiful, and this first sentence really kind of made it, helped me click it all together. When food is plentiful, circadian rhythms of animals are powerfully entrained by the light-dark cycle. However, if animals have access to food only during their normal sleep cycle, they will shift most of their circadian rhythms to match the food availability. I mean, that kind of makes sense. We really would want to do that, would we not? Okay. So this was explored in the late 70s, early 80s. And to my surprise, when I was doing the homework on this didn't come up except for a really sort of psionic, like off the beaten path article. And it came up when I found this anti-jet lag diet developed at this place. This is Argonne National Labs in Illinois. And it was developed by a gentleman who passed away in 2007. He originally did, he was doing very different research before he came upon this, and he started doing research on circadian rhythms and the effect food had on circadian rhythms in rats. So in 1983, he actually published these findings, and it became a pretty big hit for a while. I did find a New York Times article, and I did share it on Facebook for those of you who are on there. Published a New York Times article in 1983 saying that millions of travelers have benefited from this anti-jet lag diet. Okay? And me going, I know a lot about diets. What is this one? This has got to be crazy. Okay? So this gentleman, Charles Ehret, he was 83 when he died in 2007, but he was looking into, oops, my apologies. He was looking into circadian rhythms in rats, like I said. And this was the fun part about it. It wasn't a crazy, like, add these foods in or take these foods out, which is usually what the diets are used to looking at. It was a feast and fast, right? And we thought that fasting was just popular in the last few years, right? We thought that was the new cool in thing. Well, sorry guys, we're at least 30 years late, okay? This guy was making this popular back in the early 80s, okay? And he found it to be really effective for avoiding jet lag. They actually tried it on athletes, and they found, this was in military personnel, and they found that military personnel who subscribed to this diet were 16 times less likely to experience the symptoms of jet lag afterwards. So let me explain it to you. What you do is 4 days out, you start with a start with a feast day. High protein breakfast, high protein lunch, good for our circadian rhythm, but then the thing that's even better for our circadian rhythm, what you learned on Turkey Day, was that carbohydrate, and what you learned in our detox diet. Carbohydrate is the best way to get you sleep at night. That's why we all go for those carbohydrate-rich foods late at night. I know it. I've been there. I do it. Okay? It's because we're trying to produce serotonin. So high protein, high carbohydrate day. Then we go into a fast day. Now he didn't go into the extremes of what we're talking about now, where we don't eat. He was talking about soups and salads, or light food, light fare for the day, just a hypocaloric diet. And then go back and do a big feast day 2 days prior. Then here's the challenge for you. Then you go into a fast, but it doesn't just stop at day -1. It has to go all the way through your travel until you get to the new destination, and you have an opportunity to have a meal on time in that new destination. Okay? So this would mean if you were flying overnight, you have a fast day the night before, you fly overnight, you don't eat that airline food, which we all know so good, and you don't eat until you have a really giant breakfast, and you have fun on the day you arrive. Wake up and feast, beginning with a high protein breakfast. Lights on, stay active. Okay? And this is a super, super simple way to very much eliminate most of the scourges of jet lag. Now, it's not the technical way we're going to get into that throws in a lot of the other Zeitgebers that we have, but it is a sort of a sledgehammer method for getting it done. Now, how to travel the world without jet lag. But I really thought this one was a great one in giving some visual representations of how to go about this. So one, if we're going from Chicago to Paris, we're doing a phase advance. And before you get too overwhelmed by the picture of the two, okay, I'm going to explain. Okay, we're going to advance. We're going to sleep slightly earlier every night. Okay? So, before you go crazy, the pink is sleep time. Okay? Anytime you got an M, it would be a 0.5 milligram of melatonin, which is a small dose of melatonin. Usually the ones you get in the store are 3 or 5 milligrams. Okay? And then S is for sun, and L is for light box. Okay? Or you could use a computer. You can use a laptop that's pretty bright. It's not as effective, but it would work. Okay, and then the black outline box is your flight time. The dark triangles are your T-min, your temperature minimum. So this is when we talk about the sleep talk, you actually hit your lowest temperature about 4:30 in the morning for the average person. So we're shifting slightly every night that T-min so that it lines up with the time zone in Paris. Okay. So, and this is really hard to read, I know, for you guys in the back, but this person is theoretically going to bed around midnight and then waking up around 8. So this sounds like a wolf to me. Okay? But they're shifting their sleep cycle an hour a day, and they're moving 5 hours in advance. Okay? And then they arrive in Paris, only having to adjust 1 or 2 more hours. Okay? And they don't have the negative effects that you might have arriving that day. And this arrow here indicates that you could fall asleep at any time on that airline flight. It's not a big deal. It'd be probably a struggle to fall asleep that early, but you've been training your gut, actually. And they didn't mention this, but I know we talked about it in the detox diets talk, where your gut has much more melatonin in the sleep talk as well. Your gut produces much more melatonin than your pineal gland that we used to think. So we're putting that melatonin in our system, and that's going to help cue our gut to produce more, okay? And shift our circadian rhythms up just slightly. So the important things are here, that you're getting sun exposure as soon as you wake up, and you're getting, you might have to make that artificial sun exposure for the last couple of days to 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, okay? And then sunlight early, as soon as you get off the plane in Paris. Never a dull moment here, is there? That's what happens when you're at a training center, okay? Then let's go the other way. Then we're going from San Francisco to Beijing. Now, of course, we're a few hours ahead of San Francisco, as we would say ahead. Now we're actually phase delayed, or phase advanced. But this is a good way to understand what we would do. So a couple other things we're adding to this equation. Okay, I know it looks more complicated, but that's because we are actually flying back in this case too. Okay, so that's why there's more involved here. But the sleep cycles are the same, the purple. The sun is still involved, the light box is still involved, and these temperature minimums are still involved. Okay? Melatonin's still hanging out, still talking to us. Okay? So what we're talking about here, the other thing that has now visited us is this D, which would mean darkness. So sunglasses, minimizing your exposure to light so that you can further phase delay. Okay? So this means that we would want to stay awake a little bit later, a couple days before we leave. And you'll notice here that it's, like I mentioned earlier, it's easier to phase delay than it is to phase advance. So we can phase delay by a couple hours every night. Not have much of a problem with it. So for us here on the East Coast, if we're going to the West Coast, we can phase delay, and it's pretty easy, and it's not going to affect us too much. Okay? But if we're going to China, it's going to be a little bit different. Okay? Which I did in 2006 and did not understand this at that time. And it was a miserable few days when I did arrive. So we can, when we're trying to phase delay, it's not only important to keep light on late on in the night, it's also important to keep darkness later on in the morning. We're still going to want to wake up early, okay? We all get on our rhythms. So we're going to want to keep a light to a minimum so that we can further shift our exposure. Okay? Might need a light box. Okay? So this allows us to shift our circadian rhythm. Now, one thing that the researchers pointed out was that once they're in Beijing, they didn't quite advance or delay so that they're on the same sleeping schedule that they would have been in San Francisco. Instead, they only delayed till they're sleeping about like 8 o'clock in the evening instead of midnight. So that actually makes it easier to re-advance coming back. Okay? They might even though they're kind of wolf-like in the United States, they might be a little bit more lion-like in Beijing. They'll deal with it for a few days. Those of you who remember Michael Brews, referring to Michael Brews in his Power of When book, with all those animal references. But it would be easier to come back. Okay. So what are some other tactics we can employ to make sure that our travel time and our arrival is not so disruptive? Well, one, I do recommend this, is using compression gear. Okay? Especially because we're not going to be moving a whole lot on the flight, and even if you're really good about getting up every hour, on the hour, and walking around, you're still going to get off that plane after being on there for 8 hours with swollen feet. Okay? So what I recommend here is getting some compression garments that actually go around the toes and not just around, to the ankle or even just to the toes. I recommend a full sock. Why? Because you don't want blood pooling in your toes either. Okay? That's not any better than just pooling in your ankles. Okay? So this has been effective in preventing deep vein thrombosis. Next, you can use caffeine, and it's crazy because I don't think I've given a talk where I haven't talked about caffeine almost ad nauseum. Every time it comes up, every single time. But as far as circadian rhythms, and this is really related to athletes more so than general population, I would say. When we're experiencing a deleterious effect on our athletic performance, let's say we have to travel to another destination, we can only get in a day before, or maybe 2 days before at best, and we have to compete. So for those of you doing Ironman races, those of you doing marathons, those of you doing whatever competition you're wanting to do, we can utilize caffeine to minimize the effects of our fatigue. Remember we talked about that in, I believe it was the last talk, where we said that caffeine doesn't really make you more alert, it just prevents you from falling more asleep. Prevents that adenosine from making you sleepier. So we can actually negate the negative effects, which is using a double negative, but we can reduce those negative effects that it would have on our athletic performance. This is more effective for endurance performance rather than speed and power events, by the way. You can use pharmaceuticals. Caffeine, in this case, in these articles, melatonin was regarded as a pharmaceutical. And in many countries it actually is. And that did surprise me. I didn't realize that I'm not sure if it's all of Europe, but most of Europe, you're not able to get melatonin without a prescription. So in the United States, we are at an advantage that we have that, but it's also, with great power comes great responsibility. And if you overuse melatonin, your own production will go down. So it can be considered a pharmaceutical aid. Melatonin can be a useful tool to counter the effects of jet lag on human sleep phase shifting when administered at the proper time. So we got the timing earlier in this presentation. But greater effects seen in sleep phase shift occur when the patient is treated in conjunction with light therapy. Okay? So we have to use multiple avenues to achieve this. Okay? It also found that it was better for, again, phase advancing. It was more important for phase advancing than for phase delay, which makes sense. There are many smart drugs on the market now, modafinil being one of them, that is actually used in airline pilots, has been able to reduce the negative effects on like executive function and thought processing during simulated night shifts. And there are several reviews out there, from a Dr. Charles Sandels, who summarized all of the pharmaceutical aids that you could employ to help a team. Now, we're not going to go into those because I'm by no means a doctor, and I'm not going to make those recommendations for you tonight. But I want to make you aware of them. Okay? Now, on the other hand, I always have to round out the presentation, and I always have to give you all sides. There are some pretty negative effects, not just from the circadian rhythm delay or advance, but also from just being up in the air and being exposed to a much higher degree of radiation. Now, depending on your source, the radiation is not as high or could be very, very high, depending on what information you're getting. Suffice it to say that you're exposing your body to an environment that it's not really used to, okay? We compress the air in the cabin, of course, but it's not compressed to our liking because we just still have to adjust our ears. So even that is a recognition that, well, this is not a normal environment for us. And we're also we're getting more exposed to more cosmic rays when we're up in the airplane. So that's where you see that recommendation on your sheets that, I take a greens drink before and after that flight. Okay? Because I know I'm going to get exposed to all these things, and I may as well just improve my antioxidant capabilities, my nutrient densities. It's not going to hurt me as long as I'm not taking one that has a lot of extra multivitamins in it that I wouldn't want to be compounding, but that's for another talk. Just making sure that I'm increasing my nutrient density. We talked about that in the detox talk, where we can pull out, we can chelate some of those those toxins that might be building up. So are flight crews at risk because of cosmic rays? Slightly more. We don't know the exact effects in a lot of cases. But we do know that there have been demonstrated cognitive deficits, temporal lobe atrophy, disturbances in the menstrual cycle, which is this is the article that they were citing right then. They can occur with jet lag. Of course, we're talking about inappropriate circadian phases. Cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes are direct or indirect results of the circadian rhythm shift. And then we're also seeing the development of some malignant tumors, especially in pilots who are exposed to this over and over again, and then have a window in front of them, so they have even more exposure than we do. We try to look at the tiny window. Doesn't always work to our advantage. And I don't like sitting on the windows. I'm an aisle guy. I want to be able to get out. Yeah. But that's just me. Okay. So we are seeing an increased risk of melanoma in airline pilots and cabin crew, and myeloid leukemias. Okay. Again, is flying in an airplane causing you cancer? No, there are plenty of other things causing cancer too. But take care of your diet before and after, and you'll have less of an effect. I'm not telling you not to travel. That's ridiculous. Okay? But I am telling you, hey, you guys are athletes. You're treating yourselves better than most of the population. I want you to make sure that you arrive and can perform when you get there. Okay? You guys don't just travel for fun. You travel for racing. You travel for business. You travel for whatever you want. You travel for your family to be there on the other end. Okay? So it's important to arrive and be there to thrive. So now I get to dig into this review article by Thomas Riley and Louise Burke, which was a lot of fun, and I did post some quick hit videos. So if you want to go back and see those are on Facebook. Just like what are the top hits that we want to see from our athletes when we're traveling and wanting to negate any negative effects that we have. So one, make sure that you're aware that you will be dehydrated in the air. Okay? That circulated air-conditioned air, we lose our moisture from respiration. Okay? An estimate of 15 to 20 extra milliliters per hour of flight would be an acceptable recommendation. Okay? Just a small amount more, but that's per hour. Okay? Here's a quick list. Athletes are going to be exposed to a change in environment. Exercise intensity might actually be reduced, not because you want it to be reduced, but because you might be arriving at altitude or after a few days of travel and you just can't pull it out anymore. Okay? Your circadian rhythm has been shifted, and we talked about that having a negative effect, especially on endurance performance. What happens when we're tired, when we lose a night of sleep? Well, our rating of perceived exertion goes up. So for the same work we did before we traveled, it hurts more when we arrive at our destination. The new environment may provide reduced access to food and food preparation opportunities. Right. Not every hotel room I stay in has a full kitchen that's already been stocked. No, I got to figure out where our grocery store is, even if there is one around. Okay? When I traveled in Europe this summer, we ended up with a lot of trouble finding the grocery stores. We really just wanted regular food, and sometimes that just wasn't possible. And so doing your homework before you go is a really good idea. The new intake, this intake may be coming from hotels, restaurants, and takeaway outlets, rather than being tailored to the special needs of athletes. A new food culture may be disagreeable to some with fussier palates. Those who want to eat just pasta and white rice and chicken McNuggets all the time. Differences in hygiene standards. Yes, it's not a huge problem in the United States or most of Europe, but it is a problem in some of Europe, some other countries in the Americas, and then Asian countries. Make sure that you know what the hygiene standards are and whether you need to be drinking bottled water or something else, or should want to drink something else. Reading the food labels, something you may not think about. You need to, if you are into your nutrition, you might need to learn a little bit of a new language to read the food labels in a different language. They're not always going to be in English for us. And then common challenges, and again, this is geared toward mostly to younger athletes, but I do see this when, yes, all you can eat buffet, this is awesome, this is fun. Okay, well, I think this occurs a lot in team sports. Everybody, the camaraderie starts to take over. Everybody gets really excited. Be aware of that. Airline food. Order ahead if you can, okay? Or just say no. In some cases, bring your own. In a lot of cases, okay? Sometimes you'll get really good food. Sometimes you won't. There's a really cool website out there, airlinemeals.net. Again, something you discover when you're doing a talk like this. Airlinemeals.net posts the best and the worst of airline food. So this was a flight. I thought this was pretty good, small, but good. Maybe that's just for my taste. Maybe I could eat 3 or 4 of these. But Japan to Malaysia this was just a few weeks ago, by the way. Some other recommendations for when we actually when we travel for athletes. Investigate the food issues on the travel routes, meaning the airlines, and at the destination before leaving home. I now have on my travel list, find out what the grocery stores are called in the new country. What is the name? What do they call them? What is the brand? And make sure you know where they are. And also, coffee is kind of important to me, so I got to find out where the coffee outlets are, and are they open at the time of day I want to be there. When moving to a new time zone, athletes should adjust their eating times as quickly as possible to use well-planned exposure to light, which we already talked about. Recognize the unseen fluid losses in air-conditioned environments. Investigate the issues of food and fluid hygiene in the new environment. If you are taking care of your nutrition, this should not be a surprise. Organize a suitable supply of portable and non-perishable foods. Take care of it. I don't know how many times I got the question, I don't know what to eat when I travel. Well, it's gotten a lot better. There are some really fantastic restaurants now in some of our airports. I was just in Denver last week, and there was an awesome restaurant in Denver that I could get in the airport, in the Denver airport. That's not always the case. It's better now, but 10 years ago, yeah, you didn't want to eat at an airport if you were an athlete, so you had to take your own things. Okay? You can now, with the glory of the internet, you can search the internet before, you can search that airport before and find out what actually is there. Look at those menus and find out how much you're going to spend, because you will spend more if you're eating in an airport, and what you can actually get that is going to fuel your performance. And then, I think maybe even something that you can take away tonight is something that one of my rules for living is always fight for your food. If you're treating your body really well, always fight for your food. This means be assertive in restaurants. This means if they serve you something or something on the menu that you don't want, say I don't want it. Okay? And then something that's really hard for me is sending it back when it's not right. Like but I don't want to trouble them. That's not, I'm a jerk. You got to do it, right? And then sometimes, yeah, you're going to have to pay a little bit extra to get the food that you need. But the health effects of that are going to far outweigh the money you're going to spend on that. Okay? So be assertive. There are, by the way, for those of you who want to get, if you've got a travel agenda coming up very soon or anytime in the future, you can check out many of the sort of apps for for prescribing your own jet lag strategies. Okay, there are entrainment apps. I believe there's an app called Entrain that you can get for your phone. This is an example of one, Jet Lag Rooster, okay, that you can plug in where you're flying from and where you're going, and all the details of your flights, and then you want to know how you're going to shift your sleep cycle. And I would recommend using this third setting. I'm going to adjust my circadian rhythm a couple days prior to leaving instead of the day you arrive. And then check this box for melatonin if you want to try that. But I know that it's effective, so I would recommend it. So the takeaways from tonight are that you can control your circadian rhythms, and you can shift them in one way or the other so that when you do arrive in your new destination, you won't have those negative effects, like the cognitive deficits, the drained energy, the lost performance that you would have had if you just said, well, let's wing it.